Yeah. You just, can you say something? Is it, for you, is it clear? For you, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can you say something?
Yes, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes. Now it's.
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Yeah. Even visual and audio are clear, right?
Yeah. For us
Yes.
also, your audio and video is clear. Done. You can
Yes, sir.
unmute. No
Yeah.
problem.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Session, you're comfortable?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Sir, Robert sir. Dr. Robert sir.
Yeah. So can we start?
11 o'clock, yes, sir. We can start, sir.
Yeah. Okay, done. Session, if you don't mind, can you just for a minute stop sharing?
Yes, we'll do.
Yeah. I'll just have a word. Then you can keep the slide perhaps after the welcome. Okay. Yeah, just for a minute.
Yeah. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah. Please. Okay.
For some reason, it's not allowing me to stop sharing.
No, it's.
Oh, yeah, I found it.
Okay. Done. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. Daksha Shakti will start.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second day of the international webinar on Every Child Matters, Reaching the Unreached, Strategies, Challenges, and Success Stories, jointly organized by the Center for Capacity Building Programs for School Teachers, TNTU EU, Chennai, and Crossland College, Brahmava, Udupi. This morning, I just reading the newspaper. I read an article titled, Leadership is not a title, but an attitude we carry wherever we go. What a beautiful statement it is. It goes very well with today's theme. I just like to take a few seconds. Once an eagle built its nest on the top of the mountain. After hatching the eaglets, it was time for the small ones to fly. But the mother eagle was very anxious because there was nothing below to support the small ones except the air. But it had to complete the parental mission of making the eagles to fly. It knew that until her children discovered their wings, there was no purpose for their lives. The push was the greatest gift of love she could offer. So finally, the mother eagle pushed the children one by one, and they started flying in the sky. My dear teachers, the role of each of us is the same, to help the children to find their wings and help them to fly as leaders. Today, we have an extraordinarily talented young man who will inspire all of us really to teach the students to become leaders. That's Mr. Seshang. Mr. Seshang, welcome to the second day of our international webinar. In fact, just for the audience, right now he's in Johannesburg. He has got up too early today and it's only around 7 o'clock this morning. But he has made a lot of other adjustments in spite of his work schedule, and he has made himself available to us. So first of all, thanks, Ishang, for this great gesture. Now I request Ms. Salva, our final year outgoing student, to welcome everyone to this session. Salva, please.
Am I visible, sir?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Salwa Muhammad Qasim, just completing my degree from Crossland College, Brahmavara. It's my privilege to welcome you all to the second day of the week-long international webinar on Every Child Matters, Reaching the Unreached, Strategies, Challenges, and Success Stories. It is said, behind every successful woodcutter, there's a sharp axe. Similarly, behind every great leader, there's a teacher, a guru who sharpens his students' skills and abilities to emerge into a great leader. The focus of today's session is just that. How can the teachers teach students to be leaders instead of just transferring some subject knowledge? So, to begin with, I would like to welcome the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Tamil Nadu Teachers Education University, Chennai, Professor Panchanatham, respected Registrar Professor V. Balakrishnan, Dean of Faculty, Professor M. Govindan, Principal of Crossland College, Professor Samuel K. Samuel, and the Organizing Secretary, Dr. Sivashakti Raj Ammal. I deem it a privilege to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Sashank Rao, formerly Chief of Staff at African Leadership Academy in South Africa and incoming student to Harvard Business School. He will be taking us today through the journey of how do we teach students to be leaders. Sashank Rao, an alumnus of Little Rock Indian School, is a 26-year-old education professional and entrepreneur, currently living in South Africa. Sashank was the Karnataka state topper of AISSCE, that is in grade 12, exam in 2012 with an aggregate of 98%, which remained the highest ever score in Little Rock's history until recently. He was also awarded the Outstanding Student Award. After graduating from high school, Sashank pursued his undergraduate from IIT Madras. He studied electrical engineering with specializations in biomedical sciences. While at IIT, Sashank interned for several international organizations such as Deutsche Bank, Johns Hopkins Hospital in US, and National Institute of Physiological Sciences in Japan. Before landing a full-time job at McKinsey and Company, a leading US-based management consulting firm. While at IIT, Sashank worked as a weekend tutor at Avanti Fellows, an impactful non-profiting fostering science education in India. He helped provide academic and non-academic support to 25 students from low-income backgrounds preparing for IIT JEE. Out of the 25 students, all 25 were selected for the JEE Advanced 2016, of which 5 scored a rank below 20,000 in the prestigious examination. As a student, he launched a social initiative called Pledge a Book, collaborating with his friends from college. Over 2 years of its bootstrapped operation, they mobilized over 20,000 books, built 10 libraries, and associated with 20 plus NGOs for delivery of their books and resources. After IIT, Sashank worked as a management consultant at McKinsey for 2 years. Although this work was exciting, it was not fulfilling enough for him. His quest to find fulfillment led him to join African Leadership Academy, an educational non-profit institution in South Africa. ALA is a secondary school focused on building leadership traits in young Africans. Most students who come to ALA come from underprivileged backgrounds but go on to build companies or work for leading organizations. While at ALA, Sashank worked as a chief of staff in the dean's office, working on initiatives to improve inclusions in his students' cohort and helping students make the right transition to universities. Sashank brought this unique model to India in the form of Parivartan Academy. Last year, he ran his first ever boot camp at Little Rock Indian School for grade 11 students. This novel program received a lot of positive reviews from both students and teachers alike. He is now headed to Harvard University, one of the best universities in the world, to pursue his MBA and build an educational enterprise contributing to the development of India. Dear Mr. Sashank, we are looking forward to an exciting session with you. Thank you.
So that is Sashank for you. I feel greatly honored to really get him on board today to speak to all of us. I'm sure his mother, who is in India, listening to him, will really feel very proud of him. Sashank, we are very happy that you have joined us. Please always, you are inspiring. And today we are looking forward to another inspiring session. Yes, Sashank, over to you. Dr. Shakti, we can go on?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think it's all set. Please.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Clive. Thank you, Selva, for that great introduction. Before I start, I just wanted to do a quick check if my audio is clear and if you can start seeing my screen when I share it. I've shared my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
you are audible. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shashankar Rao. I'm a 26-year-old educational professional currently living in South Africa. Most of you might be thinking, why is a 26-year-old person giving a workshop to experienced educators? I wondered the same thing when Dr. Clive reached out to me for a session a couple of weeks ago. But I guess this directly relates to the topic of today's presentation. That is, how do we teach young people to be leaders? I believe that there is no age to teach leadership. There is no age to start exhibiting leadership traits. In my honest opinion, anyone can become a leader. But the question is, how do we build effective and ethical leadership? It's not just important to be a leader, it's also important to be a leader who is both ethical and effective at the same time. Let us tackle this by answering the first question of today's day, which is, why do we even need leaders in the first place? I'm guessing all of you can identify this image, right? Like, just type in your chat what this is. Like, just take out your chat and just type what this is. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of responses. Yes, this is a picture of a banana. I think bananas carry several important lessons about leadership. Bananas, as you might expect, are one of the world's largest export crops. In 2016 alone, banana exports amounted to more than $12 billion worldwide. Each year, 17 million tons of bananas are exported for export. This year alone, India exported over 6 billion rupees worth of bananas. We, in fact, are one of the biggest consumers of banana as well. Bananas are probably one of the most successful fruit organisms in the world. They're all over the place, and this is strange because bananas, it turns out to be a rather prudish. They don't seem to like to copulate. Growing bananas in the traditional sense is rather very difficult because they're not keen to reproduce. This frustrated banana growers for a very long time until they discovered that it was in fact easier to clone bananas by the process of producing what they called as suckers, where each new banana tree is a clone of another banana tree. So what you do is you basically cut the stem of a banana and then you plant it elsewhere to create a direct offshoot of that plant. This method requires no copulation at all. Even more excitingly, for the big banana farmers, it also produces identical bananas. Each and every banana is identical in shape, texture, taste, and color. 9 out of 10 people in the world can easily identify a banana, which is why when I showed this picture to all of you, it was quite easy for you to see that this is a banana, and that was the first thing which popped into your head. But as you see, banana, if they were mating naturally, each family of offspring would express a different trait. Some would be sweeter, some less sweet. With this method, each banana you buy is just as identical as the previous one by any meaningful measure. Strange to imagine, isn't it? It gets stranger still. It turns out today, virtually all bananas grown for export are identical clones of a single banana called the Cavendish banana, which is what you see as the first image on the slide. If you purchased or consumed a banana in the last 60 years, unless it was grown locally, in the case of India, in India you find a wide variety of bananas which are on the screen. But say you're consuming a banana in the United States or in the UK or any other country outside of India, it is most likely that you've eaten a Cavendish banana. This clone comes from none other than England, and it was cloned around 60 years ago. The Cavendish tree that lives in of all the places, which is England, it accounts for the vast majority of bananas in all supermarkets and the vast majority of stores around the world. So Cavendish bananas as a single organism is doing so well compared to every other banana out there. BBC recently said that a full fourth of all the bananas consumed in India, which is we consume a lot of bananas, are Cavendish bananas. Almost any banana grown in China, whether for consumption, export, cooking, or throwing at people, is a Cavendish banana. You could almost say that Cavendish banana at this point has colonized human beings. manipulated us into carrying it around the world, planting it, feeding it, and growing it and duplicating it. Total servitude, I say. 60 years ago, the Cavendish banana was a distant second to another banana called the Gross-Michael banana, which is what you see on the second image on the slide. It was a much larger, a more delicious, and a pervasive clone. Then came something called the Panama plague, or the Panama disease, or the Fusarium wilt. This fungal disease in a very few short years attacked and wiped out every single Gross-Michael farm on the planet. The Gross-Michael, in all its growth, all its perfect glory, had no immunity to this disease. Since all bananas were identical clones, they were all equally susceptible. Utter devastation ensued. Entire countries' economies were crippled. So what did the farmers do? They went in search of another banana, one restrained to the fungal disease. They found that's when they found the Cavendish banana. Sure, it didn't taste the same, but it was close enough. And it couldn't grow in the same way. The same soil had just killed their glorious crops. So humans switched bananas very easily. The trade went on, and the Cavendish banana now is the king. From this, we can learn that the humans are bad at addressing the root cause of problems. We repeat mistakes in a rush to kind of protect and recoup our efforts. But now the wilt is back. A new strain of Panama disease has emerged, the one that attacks Cavendish bananas. And the bananas are dying. And we don't yet have another strain to replace it. Once again, entire farms, communities, economies which are built on this single clone or monoculture are being wiped out by a single threat. The same thing that makes the Cavendish monoculture strong, its perfect repeatability, is now its final undoing. Okay, you might be thinking, why have I listened to a story of bananas for the first 10 minutes of this webinar? What does this have to do with leadership, right? But I think growing bananas is actually like developing leaders. You see, what India needs today is not one perfect breed of leaders, not one monoculture that can be perfected here and grown elsewhere and cloned and transplanted to farms and greenhouses of social betterment, political progress, economic growth, and genuine equity. One perfect transformation banana is not what we need. What India needs is instead a vibrant community of strange, resilient, beautiful bananas, each one with a different strength, susceptibilities, weakness, and immunities. Sweet bananas, sour bananas, tall bananas, and short bananas. Quiet leaders, loud leaders, slow leaders, and fast leaders. Young leaders, older ones, male and female leaders. Leaders who come from rich, middle class, and lower class backgrounds. The challenges of India are myriad, and the solutions will also be myriad. Let's do a quick exercise before we move on. I don't want to keep speaking throughout this 1 hour. Can you identify these leaders on the screen? There are 4 people on the screen. And I would also like you to guess their age at which they started the careers they were known for. Maybe also write like a 1-line description if you know something about the person. I will wait for a couple of minutes. You can start typing in the chat box. You can, put your name, put the name of the person you're referring to, write something about them in a single line, and then tell me what age they might have started out their careers. Let me just stop sharing for a second. Yes. Okay. We're getting there. We've gotten 3 people correct. There's 1 more person to be correctly identified. Yeah, most of you are saying that they started out quite early in their careers, which is absolutely correct. Okay. Yes, that is a young girl in the picture there. Okay, I think we're good now. I think I've got most of the answers. I really love the statement there which said that they're resilient leaders who don't give up with a never give up attitude. Okay. Okay, this person is no stranger to any one of us. This is the 14th and the current Prime Minister of India and the ex-Chief Minister of Gujarat from 2001 to 2014. He's none other than Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As a child, Modi helped his father sell tea at Watnagar railway station. Modi started out his career in politics and political advocacy at the age of 21. The second picture you see on the screen is a person called Greta Thunberg. Greta is a world famous Swedish environmental activist who gained popularity for her view that humanity is faced with an existential crisis from the climate change. She started her advocacy as a young 15-year-old girl sitting outside the Swedish parliament protesting for the government to do something about the laws regarding climate change. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize last year and this year being the youngest ever nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize. The third person here is again a no stranger to any one of us. It's none other than Mahatma Gandhi. He is also known as the father of the nation. M.K. Gandhi was born into quite a privileged household. He left his family at the age of 23 to move to South Africa, which is where I'm currently doing the Zoom call from. He fought against the racial injustice in South Africa and launched the most effective struggle against colonialism in India against the British. He started his career in nonviolence and fighting for injustice as an advocate when he was just 24 years old. And lastly, the person who most of you have currently identified is none other than Kiran Bedi, who is a retired IPS officer, a social activist, a former tennis player, and a politician who is the current Lieutenant General of Pondicherry or Puducherry. Kiran, who is an inspiration to many boys and girls like me, was the first woman IPS officer of India and started her service in 1972 at the young age of 23. The point I'm trying to make here is that the future and the current leaders come in all shapes and forms, unlike the Cavendish bananas. They mostly start out young and build a life of resilience, like many of you have pointed out in the chat. They're male, female, rich, poor, young, old. They come in all sorts of shapes and forms. But there's something which is common about these leaders. And that is exactly what I have been doing for the last 3 years, is to understand what are the leadership traits of different leaders and how do we start building these traits very early on in young children, be it a student at a high school level, be it a student at a college, and how do we start creating a platform for them to become the leaders we want them to be. Let's do another exercise. I think this one is going to be a much harder one compared to the previous one. I want you to start listing down, take a piece of paper, list down all the traits you think which an effective leader should possess. And I'm emphasizing on the word effective here because we have leaders all over the world. There is no dearth of leaders, and the leaders display all kinds of qualities today. But what I want you to do is to take a piece of paper, start writing down what you think are the effective traits of a leader. And I want you to list as many qualities as possible. It can be both soft skills, can be hard skills. It would be easy to think of a leader you admire and maybe list down the skills and behaviors in that person you deeply appreciate. Let's take maybe a few minutes. I would also ask Dr. Clive, I would ask Ms. Deepa, everybody else on the panel to also do the same exercise.
Yeah. So maybe you want to listen to some of the participants?
I think after they note down, I'll ask them to speak and tell me what some of the traits are.
Okay.
Dr. Clive, can we unmute a few participants to talk about?
Yeah. Yes, it should be possible.
Yeah.
Dr. Shushikti, maybe some of the people you can unmute.
Okay, let me do that.
Okay. Yeah, you can do that.
Okay. I'm allowing Alia Praveen to speak. Alia, if you have, I really like the things you've written down. Can you just elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, good morning. I have written good communicator, time-bound, disciplined, crisis manager, ethical, commander, daring to take firm decisions, creative, balanced, non-judgmental, and unbiased.
Got it. All of them are like extremely amazing traits. Did you have a particular person in mind when you wrote down these traits?
I feel that APJ Abdul Kalam is one of the best leader.
Okay, I agree with you too. He's such a visionary, and he kind of fits into every single, I think, description which you said, except maybe commander. I think he fits into every single thing which you said.
Role model.
Yeah, leading by example, being a role model to young and old people alike.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alia. That was really helpful. I might unmute just one more person to speak. I'm going to unmute Dolores, Miss Dolores, I think. I really like the traits which you've written down.
Hi, good morning, Shashank.
Hi, good morning.
Traits is one is initiative, having initiative, then presence of mind, critical thinking, collaborative, visionary, proactive, persistent in what he wants to achieve, organized.
Yes. I also really like what you wrote. You added empathetic as well on the list in the chat.
Yes.
Yeah, can you explain what empathetic means?
Empathetic is like being sensitive to the one working under him or who is leading, the ones he's leading.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was a great list of qualities which we should instill in our leaders. Thank you so much, Ms. Dolores.
Thank you.
Maybe just one last person. I'm just trying to see if there's somebody who has put down a different trait. Yes, I'm quite interested by this. I'm going to allow, I think, Ms. Vasumati to speak. I'm really curious by what you mean by taking blame for themselves for failures and credit for his team or her team for success.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Hi, Ms. Vasumati. Good afternoon.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are very well audible.
What I meant was like a leader who will be leading a team when they are doing a particular task. If there is a failure, that person, he will blame himself for the failure of the entire team. But when there is a success, he will give the credit to the entire team.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Did you have any particular person in mind when you thought about this, or it is just a general observation which you made?
So I have seen many people like this, sir.
Have you seen your students doing this?
Students also, and even in my previous working place, I had an officer who was exactly the same. Whenever there, like we used to organize an event or something of that kind, if something mistake happens, he was always used to take the blames on for himself. And whenever the event organized would go well, he would give credit to all his team members.
You had an excellent manager in that case. I really also like your point around good listener, what you mentioned.
Yes, sir.
Like, I think it's extremely important for people to listen well, as much as them being good communicators, which a lot of the people here have kind of mentioned. Thank you so much. Very astute observations.
Yeah, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Awesome. I think we can go back to the presentation now. This is something which I created last night. I was just thinking, what are my views about what a leader should be? Obviously, this list is not exhaustive, but I see that most of you have kind of touched upon these qualities. We know that sometimes we over-index on some of these qualities. Not all leaders need to be the smartest people in the room, but they do need to have the self-awareness and the security to listen to the smartest people in the room, which is what a lot of you said, that they need to be good listeners. They're mostly hardworking. They believe in something very strongly that benefits the society as a whole. They believe in themselves even more, even if the entire world is against them. They care genuinely for each other and for fellow human beings, and sometimes even animals and plants, which is what we see on the activism side of things, where we see a lot of people who vouch for animal rights. They're deeply empathetic, as most of you have said. But I think some of the most important qualities are that they're ethical, because if they're not ethical, then leadership can go really bad, as we've seen in the case of many political leaders. And when I mean leaders, don't get me wrong, I'm not only referring to political leaders. When I say leaders, I'm referring to anybody who leads a group of people. It could be a CEO of a company, it could be a politician, it could be like a teacher. A teacher is a leader. A teacher is a leader of a classroom. A teacher is a leader of a group of teachers, right? It could be a school principal. It could be somebody who's in charge of a self-help group. Leadership comes in all shapes and forms, which is exactly what the topic is, that you don't have to be a political leader to be a leader. You can be a student and lead your class. And what we need to do is try to instill some of these qualities, what you see on the screen, very early on. We should not try to think of these qualities as something which you maybe gain over time. We should start thinking about it as qualities which can be instilled quite early on in students and in children, because they need to have time to practice these skills. It doesn't come all of a sudden. You can't teach an adult to be ethical. Teaching of ethics and how to be ethical starts very early on. It starts from telling your child not to steal something. It starts from asking somebody to take responsibility about mistakes they've made. And the other qualities on the screen are that they are anti-fragile, which means that they don't break under pressure. They're quite resilient. They are collaborative, which I think is very, very important for a leader. What happens when leaders behave differently? Let's look at two case studies, and I'm quite sure most of you at least know one of these case studies. Can you identify the people in the image on the screen right now? Please put on the chat. If you can identify both of them, I would be very impressed. But if you can identify at least one of them, I would be quite happy. Just go to the chat and just type who these people are. Yeah, most of you seem to have got the person on the left correct. The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump Jr. Yes, Dr. Clive actually got the second person correct, who is the President of New Zealand, whose name is Jacinda Ardern. I'm sure all of you know where this story is going. Let's see what happened in America with the leadership of a president like Donald Trump. Despite the inertia and dysfunction that plagued the early stages of US government's response to the coronavirus pandemic, the situation in the US could still have been somewhat rescued if Donald Trump had merely backed the efforts of his own team, public health experts. Instead, Trump showed very little active leadership and frequently undermined the governmental efforts and advice aimed at curbing the virus by encouraging people to protest and refusing to wear a face mask until very recently. He refused to believe in science. His own scientific advisor, Dr. Fauci, was shamed and shunned by him on Twitter. He used the pandemic as a means to spread distrust in a country which was already so divided by racism and hate. He polarized a country which was already so polarized. He lied every single day, practiced unethical behaviors to ensure that he wins in the upcoming re-elections. What happened after that? I mean, let's compare him to Ms. Jacinta Ardern on the picture, who did exactly the opposite to what Donald Trump should have done. She did exactly what a good leader should do. She listened to her cabinet members and advisors. She closed the borders of her country when everybody else was trying to figure out what was happening. Once the borders were closed, she underled an effort to rescue every single person who was stranded outside to bring them back into New Zealand. She acknowledged the magnanimity of the crisis. She did not undermine it like Trump. She instilled in them a sense of fear, a sense of confidence, not fear, in her citizens. Though she was a similar position similar to Donald Trump, where she was up for re-election, but she took her responsibilities more seriously and acknowledged what was happening. As a consequence, what we see is that, you see, the graph on the left is the number of cases between March and June in the United States and New Zealand. Obviously, I'm not making a claim that every single case was because of the lack of poor leadership or lack of good leadership, but leadership had a huge role to play in what actually unfurled in the country over the next 6 months. US over the last 1 month has recorded 1.2 million cases, whereas New Zealand has recorded 30 cases. I'm sure like Udupi has more cases than that. But the country, New Zealand, has had 30 cases in the last 1 month. They were the first country to declare COVID-free. And they did it with great pomp and joy, at the same time asking all its citizens to be aware, careful, and to practice social distancing and to wear masks, etc. If you go back to the slide, the previous slide, you see that Donald Trump did exactly what you should not be doing as a leader. Let me figure out a way to go back. Yes. So if you see the screen here, Donald Trump was unethical. He was not accountable. And like we heard from one of our participants, he did not take the blame. He kept blaming everybody else for the actions. He was decently communicative, but again, he did not communicate the right things. He was not self-aware. He was definitely not empathetic towards his people. He did not take feedback well. When his own scientific advisor asked him to do X, Y, and Z things, he did not choose to do that. He did not collaborate with anyone. He was not community-centric. This is no means an exhaustive exercise. I'm not trying to say that every single leader needs to exhibit these qualities, and if you don't exhibit these qualities, you might end up being a bad leader. But what we see today is most leaders who are really, really bad exhibit none of the qualities which makes a leader who is good. So coming back to what I do, I've spoken a lot about bananas, I've spoken a lot about world leadership, I've spoken a lot about leaders of India. But just to give you a quick glimpse of what I do as a professional, today I work for a school in South Africa called the African Leadership Academy, which I'll refer to as ALA going forward, just because it's a really long name. Is that it's quite simple what we do. Instead of tackling the big societal problems ourselves, like Africa, similar to India, has a lot of problems around poverty, around food insecurity, around like pandemics, diseases, healthcare. There's so many challenges which are quite common to both the continents and the country. We have a very young population, very similar to India. The culture is also quite similar. We were colonized by the British. We have unethical leadership most times. We have weak institutional structures. So what we decided to do as a school is that we realized that there are so many problems which we wanted to tackle, but we obviously cannot tackle all the problems, right? So we thought the most sustainable way to do it is to find people who will tackle it for us. So what we do is we create leaders who can change the world on our behalf. We do that by educating them, by taking them through a 2-year pre-university program, almost like grade 11 and grade 12 equivalent of India. And we teach them how to be leaders alongside teaching them your routine subjects like science, math, etc. Where we also teach them 3 additional subjects where they learn to be leaders. So what we do is we teach them, we take them through a 2-year program. They go through this and then they go to university, mostly abroad or sometimes back in their home country. And then they come back to the continent to come back and work in institutions, to lead change, and to run for government offices, etc. Each year, we scour the continent to find young people between the age of 16 and 18 who have demonstrated a cause for social impact and change in their communities. Through our generous support, we were able to provide these leaders a home on our campus, regardless of their financial need, which I think is a very important point to what the topic of this webinar is about, which is we want to include people irrespective of where they come from. We raise money from all sorts of people, from individuals, from foundations, from donors, from student fees, and then we try to fund every single person who can come to school. We do this because we believe that Africa's problems in development is in the development of ethical and entrepreneurial and transformative leaders. We aim to develop the future Mahatma Gandhi, the next Mother Teresa, the African Bill Gates. We do this by creating a transformational educational experience. And our mission is to develop at least 6,000 leaders for Africa over the next 50 years. And the way we do this is we do it by three things. We have a model called Potential, where we seek out the best students on the continent. We bring them over from 45 different countries. We embed them with the practice of leadership, which I will come back to a little bit later, and we stimulate intellectual growth. And lastly, we connect them to powerful networks and opportunities for them to come back to the continent and to have the impact we want them to have. Before I move on, I would like us to watch a quick video. Let me just quickly stop sharing and share with my audio, and just let me know if the video is clear. So this video is about a student called Majak Ngor, who is an ALA student from batch of 2012 or 2013. He is a student from a country called South Sudan in Africa, which is one of the poorest countries in the world and has the lowest human development index. Dr. Clive, just let me know if you can hear the...
Yeah, okay, please play it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Shashank, it's audible. It's playing, it's audible.
My name is Ngor Majak Anyas. I'm a South Sudanese. I'm the founder of Education Bridge. We are taking on the responsibility of developing these young boys and girls into peacemakers, transformational leaders, and it is really a pleasure to have the faith, the trust of the parents. I think Education Bridge was inspired by my personal journey. I started school in 2000 and we used to walk about 1 hour to the school. There were not a lot of school by that time, mainly because of the civil war in the country, so most schools were destroyed. For some reason, my mom, though she has never been to school, thought education was very important, so she would send us there, and every morning we would walk about 1 hour, and then in the evening we would come back about an hour. I applied to African Leadership Academy in 2011. When I got there, it was great because I got to meet inspiring students from many parts of the continent. And I think being at ALA is probably one of the most transformational experience that I've had, in that you get people to inspire you, you get people to show you that you can do great things though you're young. They connected me with different organizations who actually provide our seed funding for building this school.
Ngor Majak, he left this home when the home was of this nature. He knows the suffering of the people of South Sudan. That is the reason he brought this education. Green Bell Academy, it is a school where every community of South Sudan will be accommodated to learn the culture of peace and development instead of destruction.
though I'm studying in the US, I still come back to South Sudan and see ways I can help in terms of promoting education.
When I grow up, I would like to be the Minister of Education. I want to become a doctor.
When I grow up, I want to be a Minister of Agriculture. I want to solve food security in South Sudan.
Leadership is about serving the community that you are in, and to me that is, right now, that is South Sudan.
Seems like okay, we are finished with the video. I want some of you to maybe raise your hand and then unmute yourself and just give me a general reflection about what you thought about the video. Can I ask Dr. Clive to start? Dr. Clive, can you just like quickly unmute yourself and just tell me what you thought about the video?
No, it's very amazing to see, a country like Sudan and how they are transformed. And, the more important point is, it's not that you're empowering them, but they want to go back to their country and become a minister, doctor, and, putting that interest in them, it's really great. That social responsibility with the leadership skill, it's really touching. Great work.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Clive. Anybody else on the chat who would like to speak can please unmute yourself. Or just raise your hand, I will unmute you guys. Or just type in the chat if you want to be unmuted. Let me just check the chat. Okay. Okay. I'm going to have a look at folks who have raised their hands. I'm hoping that they're waiting to speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to unmute Miss Anita J, who has raised her hand to speak. Anita, what do you think about the video? Okay, maybe as we wait Anita to speak.
Yeah, maybe somebody else you can.
Yeah, I'm having a feeling some of these hands are just raised by default, by mistake. Yeah.
So from the chat, you can choose somebody.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to pick Miss Sheila to speak. Sheila Madiwala. Yeah. Hello, Miss Sheila, can you hear me?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, can hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir. I want to say that children really to be responsible and they never drag for whatever they are underprivileged, and the privileges what they got after getting educated, they want to bring a change in their own society. They want to go back to their own land and bring changes and to provide facilities or good education for others.
Yes. Thank you so much. I think that's a very important point which you've made, Sheila, is that there is a very strong relation between students who come from especially underprivileged backgrounds who go on to become like something big, and then they end up giving back to their community. And that is the cycle which we harvest at ALA, where we want students to do that, where we want them to go back and give back to their communities what they have received in the form of education from ALA and from the university education. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on. I hope this video was helpful. And Majak is one such student we work with at ALA. And when Majak came to ALA, he was a 16-year-old boy. And now Majak has started his own school at the age of 21, and he employs more teachers and students than my school does. And again, this is a testimony to the fact that you're not young enough, you're not old enough to be a leader. You don't have to be young enough to be a leader. You can show leadership qualities if you feel the urge to do so. So the first thing which we do is we try to select a very diverse student body. And this is very, very important, even in the context of India, where we have so much diversity. It's that we have a 50-50% gender parity. It's very important for us to have both male, female leaders, because we believe that leadership comes in all shapes and forms, and we want students to learn from each other. So we deeply, deeply respect the gender representation in our class. We are a very selective school. We have a very small, very small acceptance rate, which means that we pick the best of the people who apply to our school from the continent. We have a lot of countries represented. And this, when you compare it to India, will just be a very similar picture with lots of different states represented with a similar gender parity and people who come from different cultures, beliefs, and different ethnic groups. So what we do is like I said previously, it's a 2-year program, and we prepare them for both academic success and we prepare them to become successful in their lives. So there's a coursework on something called entrepreneurial leadership, where we help them think and behave to be like a leader, where we teach them what a leader should be. So we allow them to run an enterprise on campus. We give them money to run a business on campus, and we teach them how to be a business person. We allow them to take up responsibilities in school leadership. We ask them to make decisions for themselves rather than the teachers and the administration making decisions for them. We also teach them a subject called African Studies, which is helping them understand their own context, because in today's world, where a lot of the world has been colonized by the Western forces, what we learn, what we see in our history textbooks is basically what the Western people wanted us to see. So it's very important that we teach them what their own context is, and we teach them what African literature is, and in our case, what Indian literature is. And it's very important for them to feel the sense of patriotism towards their own country by reading these texts and by practicing these behaviors. And lastly, we teach them to write and speak like a leader, because as you all said, communication is a very, very important skill for leaders. Apart from this, we also teach them, we take them through Cambridge A levels and AS levels, which is the equivalent of CBSE grade 12 and grade 11 for an international school. We do this because it'll help them transition to universities much easier. And we don't want to deprive them of the formative education, which is important for them to have a conceptual understanding of a particular topic. Secondly, we help drive practice through our curriculum. We help them realize their own self, that what is the power within. So we build self-awareness, self-regulation, proactivity, values, and resilience. We help them collaborate for the shared prosperity of the continent, where we teach them accountability, we teach them personal sustainability, we teach them that the continent is a land of opportunities, and they need to start identifying these opportunities very early on to be successful. The third thing is we have a human-centered approach towards solving problems, and I will come back to this in the next slide. We start helping them think through in a very systematic problem-solving manner, which we call design thinking. We help them engage with others, it's very important them to interact with each other, to show empathy, to collaborate with each other, to show diversity and teamwork. The fifth thing is about communication, where we allow them to write well, we help them to speak well, we help them to manifest that idea into an image. We help them champion that idea, and then we help them act interdependently on each other, at the same time act independently on their ideas. And lastly, we teach them how to learn to practice, which is we teach them how to be focused. We teach them how to sustain their effort over a period of time. Like leadership is not like I have an idea today and I'm going to do something about it now and then I'm going to forget about it for the next 20 years. Leadership takes years and years of practice. Like you saw, all the leaders we saw previously, all of them started out their careers at the age of 21 to 24, but they only reached the helm of leadership at the age of maybe 45 or 50, which means they spent 15 to 20 years of their life dedicated towards something which they're passionate about. They seek feedback from each other, unlike Donald Trump. They adjust their own actions, and then we teach them how to improve by continuous iteration. Is that clear? If it's not clear, please put in the chat. I can also share these slides at the end of this presentation if you want to see some of these traits more closely. And we can also go through some of these things when you ask for questions. Coming back to what design thinking is and what a human-centered approach is, that we teach them to do 5 things when you identify a problem. We ask them to believe that they can solve the problem. We ask them to understand the problem really, really well, a step which we usually miss out while trying to solve problems. Please understand the problem extremely well from all different angles, from different people, from different perspectives. It should not be a singular understanding of a problem. It should be a multifaceted understanding of a problem. We then ask them to invent a solution. It could be a solution which doesn't work, but it needs to be invented, right? We need to do something and come up with an idea. And then you listen, you show this idea to people, you practice this idea, you practice the solution, and then you listen to feedback, and then you keep iterating on this invent. So it's a cycle of invent and listen. You invent, you listen, and then you invent again. You listen again, you invent again. So you keep iterating this, and then finally you deliver on this on the problem. This is a very simple process, and the acronym stands for BUILD, B-U-I-L-D, which is believe, understand, invent, listen, and deliver. We help students build solutions for any problem in their lives. This is something which they have to start thinking about every single day, and this is what we call design thinking, human-centered design thinking. And every single student who leaves our program has this embedded in their DNA, and they approach every single problem in their life with this angle of how do I solve this in a design thinking manner. And I think this is what we need to be teaching our students in the form of extracurriculars or in the part of curricular activities in school. This is just like some data to show that we've been doing well. Like our school has been showing a lot of progress in the student capabilities and skills. And we see that we do much better than our peers when it comes to delivering an effective education. Our alumni graduate from universities faster than most people. Like we have a very high graduation rate, which is higher compared to its peer groups in the US. And the biggest and the most important part is that ALA graduates come back to India, come back to the continent, and they work on problems on the continent. They just don't leave for a good tertiary education, but they come back and work on problems which are relevant to the continent. So why create this model for India in the first place, right? That you might be thinking, like, why am I taking an example of a continent which is not even asked to talk about this for an Indian context? Today, India is one of the youngest nations in the world, with more than 62% of its population in the working age group, which is 15 to 59 years. And more than 54% of its total population are below the age of 25. Like half the country's population is below the age of 25. It is further estimated that this average age will keep getting smaller. And compared to the US, it's going to be half of the US and half Japan in the next few years. This gives us the edge of demographic dividend over other countries, that the youth of today is increasingly becoming restless and struggling to remove the disparities. However, more efforts need to be put in if we are to become free from the vicious cycles of poverty, malnutrition, corruption, violence, religious conflict, and unemployment. All these vices are still prevalent in society today, which are not allowing our nation to function in its real spirit. We have to add 12 million jobs a year, every single year, to sustain the population of today. Youth are the most important and dynamic segment of this population in any country. It is believed that developing countries with a large population similar to ours could see a tremendous growth provided that they invest in young people's rights, education, healthcare, and protect them against bad doings. We can undoubtedly say that today's youth are tomorrow's innovators, creators, builders, and leaders. The economic trigger happens when a country has more hands to work available than more mouths to feed. To put it succinctly, the working age population has to be larger than the dependent population. If we need to add 12 million jobs a year, every single year, who is going to create them? This needs to be created by the youth of today for the youth of tomorrow. We should not only educate our youth, but also instill in them a sense of national pride. India records one of the biggest brain drains of any nation in the world, where students at mostly a graduate level leave the country and never try to come back to the country. Our biggest brains are fueling the economies of countries like the US and the big tech companies like Google. We need to get our youth to start thinking about India and to get excited about India. Even if they leave the country in their 20s, we want them to come back in their 30s or invest in India when they're in 30s, so that they can actually build companies here and lead to growth and large-scale organizational progress. Youth not harvested well can be disastrous, and we have seen this in so many different countries, especially in the Middle East. The role of youth in nation building is a critical role. They are problem solvers. They have a positive influence over other youth, other young people, and the country itself. And they're extremely ambitious. They have the ability to create an identity for themselves and to move the nation forward. However, they will not do this without the support of their teachers and their schools. If we don't help them, they will turn against each other. We need to help them to become leaders and not slackers. And this is the last slide of my presentation. How do we teach them to become leaders in classrooms? I see it as a four-pronged approach. The first one being, we need to give them opportunity to practice learning. It is not just important for them to demonstrate learning on an examination or towards a summative assessment. It's important for them to start practicing what they do. An example of this is what Delhi is doing today. So they've instituted a curriculum where every single student, I think in grade 10, gets 500 rupees to start their own business, and they have to build something over a period of 3 years, and then they have to give back the money to the Delhi government to learn how to become an entrepreneur. And I think it's very, very important for us to teach students how to run small businesses. Secondly, it's important to encourage diversity of thoughts, gender, cultural practices, backgrounds, and beliefs. We should not try to alienate a particular religious group, or try to alienate a particular group of people, because it's very important to have different perspectives in the same classroom. And we need to encourage people to share what they think, because unless they do that, they will never understand the person sitting across, and they will turn out to be non-empathetic leaders. Thirdly, we want to instill in them a passion for the country and the challenges and the opportunities. India is not just a place of challenges, right? It's not just that we have challenges everywhere. We also have enormous opportunities. And if we get our youth excited about it, the probability that they would stay on and work on these problems and harness these opportunities is going to be so much higher than us just teaching them to become an engineer or a doctor or whatever it is, and to be uncritical about their own careers and passions. Lastly, we should start rewarding ethical behaviors, and we need to help them to become collaborative. And we need to teach them to be resilient, and we need to model all these values over excellence. What we see today is a lot of schools and colleges model excellence over everything else. If a student comes up with the best marks, comes up with the best performance over an exam or in a project, the person is given all the limelight and attention. But I think we should start moving towards a society where we also start modeling and recognizing people who are more collaborative, people who are ethical, people who show resilient behaviors in the face of a crisis, because these are the qualities which make a leader. A leader doesn't have to be the smartest person in the room. The leader doesn't have to know the best math. The leader doesn't have to solve algebraic equations at any speed. A leader needs to be ethical. A leader needs to be collaborative. And these are the kind of qualities we need to encourage our young students and colleagues to model every single day. That is the end of the presentation. I will open up for questions. Again, there is no formula to teach leadership in schools. It starts with instilling some of the mindsets and habits. And the most you can do is to give them an opportunity to practice some of these mindsets and habits. And I really hope that each one of us goes back and starts thinking about ourselves and our students as leaders. And we start understanding what makes good leadership and what makes bad leadership, and we try to encourage good leadership habits going forward. Thank you so much for your time and for all the comments on the chat.
Well, Shashank, it was very, very inspiring. I'm sure you could have got the messages from the chat box. I think before we just take the questions, I just like to really say, it's a continuation of yesterday where Ms. Arati said the last part is our education has to teach people for social contribution. And what Shashank is today saying exactly same, what they do to, teach the students to give back to the society. So in fact, I remember a couple of years before when Shashank was back from one of the trips abroad, I met him with my son. And he was keeping a book. Then I asked, what's the book? Oh, sir, you're not ready to read. He said, this is a book called Give and Take by Adam Grant. Have you read it? I said, no, you take it. And he said, when should I give back? Then he said, no, I have a habit now. I do draw, paintings. I give it to people. The books, what I read, I share with the people. And he said, you keep it with you. So he practices what he is really sharing about. Hats off to you. At a young age, the amount of work that you're doing really, really inspiring. Dr. Shivashakti, now you can just proceed.
Sir, thank you
with the
so much,
question.
Shashank, sir. Thank you so much on behalf of Tamil Nadu Teachers Education University and Grassland College.
Shivashakti ma'am, hello.
Yes, yes. Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Please,
can I read
please.
the question?
Yes, ma'am, please, ma'am.
Okay. The first question, what are the skills needed to be a good leader?
Who is speaking? I'm just a little confused.
Shashank, this is Dr. Ranjini Devi. Yeah, she is from she's from one of the colleges for teacher educators. She's a professor in a college in Kerala.
Colleague, Dr. Robert Clave, sir, and myself, colleague, sir, Dr. Ranjini Devi, ma'am.
So she organized a webinar earlier. So I think you can respond to her. Yeah.
NSS Training College, assistant professor, sir.
Got it.
I'll be reading the question on behalf of Dr. Shivashakti ma'am.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay. Can I read?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
What are the skills needed to be a good leader?
An excellent question. I'm going to go back to the slide where we kind of listed down some of the skills. Again, these are not all the skills which are required to be a good leader. These are some of the skills which should start encouraging our students to kind of show. I personally think a leader should be ethical. A leader should be collaborative. A leader should be communicative. A leader should be deeply empathetic. A leader should be a good problem solver. And a leader should be resilient. These should be like my top 5 skills, which I think a leader should be. And it's easy to say these big words and say that, oh yeah, we need a leader to be this, we need a leader to be that. But I genuinely feel like we can build some of these traits in a very intentional manner in our students by creating activities, by creating curriculums which are focused on building some of these skills rather than just teaching them how to, learn about history of, India's 1930s or something like that. It's very important us to know the context at the same time, also have the skills and the mindsets to practice some of the things which we learn. And I feel that these skills will help them get there to become a leader.
Thank you, sir. Next question. What inspired to reach this level of growth?
Inspired me particularly?
Yes. The question is, what inspired you?
I think what inspired me is probably like my upbringing itself. Like coming from a really small village or a really small town like Chantar, Brahmawar, living in a single parent family and just realizing that the society doesn't work in your favor all the time. Like you have to create the opportunities for yourself, right? And like my struggle growing up, and to see that by sheer excellence and by sheer the ability to be being very confident about myself and to have the resilience that I can grow, made me believe that I could be a leader at some point, at some point of my life. And I started working for this organization called Avanti, which I think Selva mentioned in my introduction, that I started working for this organization called Avanti Fellows, which is a non-profit education institution based out of Bombay today. So they created an opportunity for students like me who at that point of time studying at IITs to go and work at like government schools and colleges in Pondicherry, because that was the closest place for me in Chennai. And I would go every weekend to go and teach at this government school. And then I realized that I was teaching them math and I was teaching them science, but there was no guarantee that I was setting them up for success in life, right? I mean, they might clear IIT JEE, they might end up going to a great engineering college, but I'm not creating them to become great citizens. And that is something which gave me the understanding that it's not just important to teach like curricular subjects, it's extremely important for us to also start developing mindsets. And like Dr. Clive said, a social mindset that we want to serve the society. And that got me inspired, and that got me into working in this particular field. And I think that is inspiration from where I come from. It's two-pronged, my own upbringing, at the same time, my experience at Avanti. And what is interesting is that the founder of Avanti Fellows is actually going to be speaking at this webinar, I think on Friday.
Yeah, he's going to speak
also
on 10th, yeah.
Yeah, he was also an alumnus of Little Rock Indian School. And I'm sure you can hear from him as well, like why he started Avanti. And it inspired people like me to create something similar, but more on a 21st century skill level rather on a science math level. Like I really want to impart these future skills to students.
Sir, one chat box question. Ma'am, please, ma'am. How a leader can handle disagreements with co-workers? How a leader can handle disagreements with co-workers? Yes,
that is a great question. And that is something which most of us see as teachers day in and day out, where a lot of people disagree with you. And it's completely okay, I think, to have disagreement, because if there is no disagreement, then nobody is thinking critically about a problem. If there is no disagreements in a workplace, then I would not want to work in that workplace, because nobody is like thinking about it critically, and everybody is just being a yes person where everybody just follows what a person says. I think the first thing to do is to listen, like listen to the disagreement and understand what the cause of the disagreement is. And again, I'm not an expert in this, like I've not worked enough to deal with workplace conflicts, but I still feel like the first thing which I would do is just to listen to the person and to understand where they're coming from. Because if the person is being sincere and honest, they are coming from a different point of view than yours. And it's only helpful to you to understand what their context is so that you can come to a compromise. But sometimes compromise is not always possible in workplace conflicts. And I think then you need to start getting into the phase of being communicative, where you need to discuss the problem with the person and understand why do you think differently from that person. And if it may require, you might even need to have a third person who can come and help moderate some of these conversations for you. And I think at the end of the day, we need to collaborate over a particular problem or an issue. And sometimes it's a policy of give and take, where you might end up getting your way this time, but you need to realize that you can't always do that. And you just need to be quite understanding of the fact that you're not always right, even if you're smart. And I think that's the understanding we need to come to kind of deal with these conflicts. I'm just going to see some of the other questions on the chat.
Sir, yes, sir. Ranjani ma'am, Dr. Ranjani ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm reading the question, ma'am. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Suggest some good activities to be conducted for students to instill leadership qualities.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from this webinar, I think. I would recommend doing two things. The first thing is that I think we should start encouraging students to take decisions in classrooms for the organization. It could be very, very simple. It could be an elected role. Like what we do in my school is that we have an elected student body, which works with the administrative team to make decisions for the student body. It doesn't mean that the administrative team has no decision-making power. It's just that every single decision which deals with the student comes from the student body, and then it gets ratified by the administrative body, which is comprised of adults and teachers. So I really feel having a governance structure in the school can really help students to start taking decisions and to feel like they're part of decision making day in and day out. That's one. That's more of a governance structure to be put in place. Secondly, I would recommend that we have we enable students to do advocacy, and we inspire them to go on and do small projects outside of their classrooms, right? Like if there's a course, let's say there is a course where we talk about like social, like poverty, right? And as a part of this exercise, we need to ask the students to go and speak to people whom they think are underprivileged, understand their problems first. And just going back to the framework of BUILD, which is believe, understand, invent, and listen. Just like asking them to go and understand the problems which people are facing, believe in themselves, come up with a solution, listen, and come up with a prototype of how this can be solved. So asking them to challenge themselves constantly by giving them activities and challenges to go and work and identify a societal problem or a need and coming up with a solution and presenting that and actually trying it out rather than just presenting it and just writing a report on it, I think will really help them learn how to become practitioners and to become leaders.
Thank you, sir. Next question. Please explain the teaching methods to develop the leadership skills in developed Western countries compared with the Indian education system.
Yeah. I think India is getting there. I wouldn't kind of differentiate saying, I wouldn't make the claim saying that Western countries are better at developing leaders than India. I think all of us don't do a great job, to be honest. And I think the one big difference between Indian curriculums and Western curriculums is that Western curriculums give a lot of focus on student autonomy and student growth. So they allow the student to take charge of their own growth rather than a teacher kind of forcing the student to do X, Y, and Z things. The earlier you start giving autonomy to students, I think it's easier for them to kind of demonstrate that leadership quality very early on. Again, the National Education Policy of 2020, I do not know how many of you have seen it, but there is a lot of focus on this now. I really hope that the execution of this policy turns out to be something which we deserve. It is a very audacious policy which puts a lot of focus on things like, which takes away the focus from assessments to put a focus on co-curricular growth, learning about self, about developing these extracurricular skills and habits and mindsets and grow in these particular areas. I just hope that we end up creating an ecosystem which enables this kind of learning for everyone.
Thank you, sir. Next question. Yes. What kind of practical challenges you faced during your journey? How did you overcome those? Please share your experiences.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think the biggest practical challenge which we face today is that the systems which we work around, are, I think there's a background noise somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's gone now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that the systems which we work around kind of are still very conventional. Like it's really hard to kind of say that, hey, I will go and transform secondary education system without actually working on the tertiary education system. Everything is so interconnected. And one of the things which I did was I tried to bring the model of ALA into India, and I called this Parivartan Academy, and I ran a few boot camps actually. And one of the first boot camps was at Little Rock Indian School, where I worked with 11th grade students to kind of think about what leadership is, what self-leadership is, and how do I start designing my career and professional growth around what I want to be, rather than what somebody else tells me to be. The biggest challenge I faced was students have never been exposed to this kind of thinking. Like it felt so radical, so new, and so audacious for most of them, because none of them have actually taken time to think about themselves as a young leader, except maybe one or two students. So the challenge which I'm talking about is that the intervention cannot happen at one place. It needs to happen across the entire ecosystem. You need to teach young children, you need to teach them to exhibit leadership qualities. It needs to start at a primary level. You can't just teach a college student how to become a leader. You need to start very early on, and you should not stop doing it until the person actually starts becoming a leader. And I think this is going to be a really hard challenge to work on. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. Like they say, Rome was not built in a day. You cannot create leaders in a day. But I'm very glad to see that the government is working on it now. The government is feeling more and more encouraged and inclined towards doing this at a very early stage. At the same time, there are initiatives beyond tertiary stage, which also helps entrepreneurs to become entrepreneurs, to leaders to become leaders, people to get into like politics, which has been the biggest challenge as well, where we see that representation is a problem when it comes to political offices, where people with privilege, people who have familial connections end up becoming like the leaders which we have today. I think it's very important for us to kind of make it more democratic as well. And that's going to take a very, very, very long time for that to happen.
Thank you, sir. Next question. In Indian society, in backward places, it's a big hurdle trying to accept a lady as a leader. What's your suggestion? How she could shoulder her responsibilities?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great question, and something which has plagued a lot of countries like India for the last so many years. I'm sure many of you have heard of the example of Grameen Bank, where what happens is women form the self-help groups, and then the bank lends to women and helps them to start their own businesses and start their own companies. And they do this because they believe that men are not as accountable as women, which I think is true in many cases. So I think it starts with coming up with more grassroots level initiatives. We need to start respecting women as a leader in a household. And by design, a lot of households in India are patriarchal. And I think we need to start going away from this patriarchal society, which takes a lot of time. But I think we should start recognizing the efforts of a woman in the house to begin with. We need to start creating educational opportunities for women. We need to allow them to go to school. We need to ensure a gender parity when it happens in schools. We need to ensure that they go and get their tertiary education, which they deserve. We obviously need to come up with policies and rules which kind of enforce these in place. So again, I cannot speak for this. I'm not an expert when it comes to gender diversity or representation of women in these places. But all I can say is that it needs to be a grassroots level initiative which starts at home and extends all the way up to building policies and systems to give them representations around the world in different offices and in different workplaces. And it starts at you, right? Like if you start believing that a woman is a leader, I think it really creates a positive reinforcement cycle where your peers, your children, everybody else will start thinking and behaving the same way.
Thank you, sir. Next question. How can we check brain drain among our intellectual group of students? How can we develop independent entrepreneurship among them?
Yes, I think that like two different questions. The first one is, how do you check brain drain? The second one is, how do you develop entrepreneurship? Brain drain, I think, will be a problem for a very long period of time until India becomes a lucrative place for most people. I think we should be okay with brain drain because it's going to happen today or tomorrow. Like you will, unless you create amazing tertiary institutions, unless you create exceptional job opportunities, students will leave the country to seek these. What is important is to have a reverse brain drain to allow these people to come back and to make it easier for them to come back. And again, I think this is a multi-pronged solution where you need to first teach them to be passionate about problems back home and opportunities back home. We need to create opportunities which are lucrative for them to come back. And lastly, we also need to make it easier from a foreign policy and investment perspective for them to invest their time and resources into companies and opportunities in India so that it doesn't become a hassle for them to do so. And I think this needs to come from a governmental level as well. And I really think it's really hard for us to stop it because we know that opportunities are great outside as well. And it's okay for a person to desire these opportunities. But it's equally important for us to instill that sense of belonging and wanting to be part of this Indian culture and Indian growth story. And I think this starts at schools and colleges before they actually leave the country. It doesn't happen afterwards. It happens much before. And the second part of the question is, how do you develop entrepreneurial mindsets? Like I said, I think we should give students to start their own companies or organizations or groups in schools and colleges. Like it could be clubs, could be an activism group. It could be a group which sells coffee on campus. It could be a group which sells, I don't know, like clothes on campus, right? And I think we need to support this ecosystem by maybe giving them funding, by giving them coaching, mentorship, etc. And what we'll see is that a lot of students will start getting interested in this ecosystem, and they'll start buying into it. And at the end of it, they will have built some of these entrepreneurial mindsets, which they should foster. And what we've seen by research is that if we can do it for a 14-year-old, we can do it for a 16-year-old, we can do it for an 18-year-old. There are schools around the world which actually encourage even 10-year-olds to be leaders and entrepreneurs in their classroom. It could just mean that the person is selling watermelons, right? But at the end of the day, the person is selling something. The person is thinking about business. The person is thinking about value creation. And I think that is the essence of what entrepreneurship is. And I would request that you check out some of the work which the Delhi government is doing on building these entrepreneurial mindsets in young people as a part of their national curriculum.
Thank you, sir. Next question. Do we need to be a leader to teach leadership skills?
I think you're already a leader. To be honest, if you're a teacher, you're a leader. You may not see yourself as a leader, but I don't think you need to be a leader to teach leadership skills. You need to be a good teacher to teach leadership skills. You need to understand what leader is, how a leader behaves, what are the traits. It's a very similar parallel to being a math teacher, right? You're not a mathematician. You don't do research on math. You didn't invent number theory. You didn't invent natural numbers, but you know how to teach math because you understand it well, and you teach really well, and you have the pedagogy and the skill sets to do it. So I think it's important for us to acknowledge the fact that we don't need to be leaders to teach leadership. We just need to understand what leadership is to teach leadership.
Thank you, sir. How to lead a team to the right direction which has no confidence?
Can you repeat? Sorry.
How to lead a team towards right direction which has lost confidence?
I think that's a very open-ended question, I think. And I think I would again go back to some of the skills which we talked about. For you to have a lot of confidence, you need to really know what you're doing. So the first phase is to understand the context in which you're operating. To have a lot of confidence and to lead a group of people successfully, you need to kind of have the kind of buy-in and the trust of your teammates. Again, going back to the previous slide, you need to kind of champion the idea. You need to interact with the people. You need to be collaborative. You need to find a way to bring a common ground. And that comes from having empathy, that comes from understanding your teammates, that comes from bringing this diversity of perspectives into the room. Once you have the buy-in and the support of your teammates, and once you understand what exactly you're doing, I think it's quite easy to lead a group of people who kind of align on the same principles towards a goal which everybody kind of agrees on and has a good understanding about.
Thank you, sir. How to become an effective teacher and a good leader in this modern world to our students?
Again, a very, very loaded question, very open-ended. Again, I'm not the best person to speak about this, but I think if I had to comment on this, I would say that firstly, understand leadership, read about it, read about what people are saying, read some research and literature which is out there. Practice these skills in your classroom, start doing it today. Start building these traits, even if it's in a very subconscious manner, even if it's in a very implicit manner, start doing it today, because the more you practice, the better you get. And keep a track of what's happening, right? It's important for us as educators to see if what we've done has actually created an impact. So I would, as a teacher, keep in touch with some of my students and understand what part of your instruction, what part of your pedagogy helped them to think like a leader, so that you can start tweaking your practices. So I would say it's a combination of like just literature review and reading about leadership, a lot of practice, and a lot of feedback about your practice. I think these three will kind of help you to become a good leader in a classroom and to be a good leadership instructor.
Thank you, sir. Students hesitate to stand in front of the crowd and speak or to convey their views and ideas. How can we improve their courage in classroom or public speaking?
I would say start small. Like they don't need to start with addressing a 500-person audience. They could start with addressing a group of 5 people and then slowly build up, right? And this thing takes practice. It's not easy. It's not easy for somebody to start speaking to like 600 people at the same time. I think it's extremely important for a person to start small and then slowly climb up and then have enough opportunities to practice so that the person knows what he's doing, and allow the person to fail. Like it's okay if the person fails, right? And encourage the person even if the person fails. As long as you don't fail, you're never going to learn how to do something. And it's also important not to discourage them from doing it. So even if they do a blunder on the stage, laugh about it, let it move on, and encourage the person to finish what they started. And that's the only way you can teach someone to do something. It's similar to learning how to ride a bicycle. Like you fall when you do it. You don't always start doing things by the get-go. There are only very few people in this world who can do it, who have the abilities to do it. For most of us, it comes with practice, and it comes with a lot of hard work. And I would say we have to encourage people to do that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
In what basis your institution enroll students or select the students for academic process?
Yeah, it's again a great question. We don't only look at academic progress, we look at some of the contributions they've made as even young children in their communities. Academic progress is one of the ways we look at how they're doing in their life, because academic progress kind of shows, if you're hardworking, it shows a lot of skills which are kind of related to leadership skills. But again, you can not be excellent at academics, at the same time be a great leader, and that's what we see in most cases. So we don't always focus on it as much as we should. But it's one of the traits which people can exhibit to get into our school. So they can be an academic outlier and become a leader, but they can also be a leader by being something else as well.
Okay. Shashank, I think exhausted answering so many questions.
Yeah, I'm exhausted.
Okay, so I think so, because it's too early you got up. But in the chat box there are a lot of questions. I am sure it was so stimulating. But maybe I can ask Dr. Shivashakti to really collect the questions and put the mails to you. If there are some specific references, you can always mail them back. Now, I'd like to read one thing, Shashank, in the mail. If you are aware, I don't know. In India, some of your teachers from Little Rock, they are also attending this webinar. And one of your teachers, Mr. Hari Krishna, has put a message in the chat box. I just like to read it for you. I feel proud to see my own student, Shashanka, who has grown so much to become a great leader and teaching lessons on leadership. Great going, Shashanka. Hari Krishna, sir. So I think that's
Thank you, Hari Krishna, sir.
Yeah, so that's I know there are many other teachers who are online, but I just like to really communicate the message. You've done a great job. Since you are also exhausted, definitely these questions will be passed on to you by the organizing secretary, so you can respond to them at a later point of time. So I think we are just coming to the close of it. I think that's Shashikti, we can just go to towards the end.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Shashank Rao, thank you so much on behalf of Tamil Nadu Teachers Education University.
So you have unmuted. Shashikti, you have unmuted.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, on behalf of Tamil Nadu Teachers Education University. God bless you, sir. God bless you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Shashank, if you know, she is actually nearing a century in terms of the number of webinars she has organized. Really, she has.
You are the young, energetic leader. You are the young, energetic leader.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm actually very impressed by the organization as well. Like it seems like People know what they're doing.
Thank you so much.
We've got a really great set of speakers on board. I would love to tune in at least to some of the lectures, and I'm very happy to see that there's a lot of representation from like local contexts. That we are seeking people who have come from places like Brahmavar, like people who have come from places like this to speak to people who come from those places. And I think that's very important to show representation in any kind of activity which we organize for people.
So Shashank,
Thank you so much, Dr. Robert, sir. You introduced.
Okay.
Super,
so I'm sure Shashank has a lot more to contribute to the world, not just to India. I just want to sum it up, and then we'll go for the vote of thanks. Since Shashank said, the place Brahmavar where we are living, I spoke to his mother last evening and said, your son Shashank is speaking, and I said, I'm going to send you the link. Please watch him speaking. And he said something about his upbringing that made a difference. For you to know, when he was just 1 year old, he lost his father, a single mother, 2 children, and Shashank has reached this.
She's joined, sir.
I don't know whether she's, I think, on YouTube. Shakti, I don't know whether we can bring in her. I'm not really sure. I think from YouTube it may be. Correct, Shashank? I think she's on YouTube.
Yeah, I think she's on YouTube.
You'd have loved to really interact with her. But it is so moving to see. She felt so proud yesterday about Shashank said, I love to listen to him. And I think a lady who has brought him that much, the resilience which he spoke right now, tremendous amount of resilience. And he has been a great inspiration to many, many children, his friends. He guides them. So I've seen it, with my own eyes. I've heard him. I spoke to him. I always, kind of awe at him the way that he speaks. Shashank, you have done a great.
Sir,
yeah.
1 minute. Shashank, mother, congratulations to you, ma'am. A gift child for him.
I think that's.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
That's really a great tribute.
God's gift. God's gift. Your son is God's gift, ma'am. Congratulations, ma'am.
Okay, I'm sure she's listening, Shashank. Definitely, you are a God's gift, and you are a gift to all of us, because you have taught us many new lessons about how to be better teachers and to create leaders. And as I said, this impact is not just limited to African Leadership Academy or even to India or Africa. You're going to really make a big impact in the future, because his intention is he wants to start a school in India where he wants to create leaders. So we pray and wish that you are really going to achieve that in a very near future. So I think we have taken a lot of your time. In fact, he's planning to come to India, this weekend. He was busy with all kind of his official work with the embassy, etc. But still he found some time to really be available. Thank you so much. Now I request Mrs. Deepa Rao from the Department of Management Science from our college to propose the formal vote of thanks. Deepa, over to you.
Good afternoon to all. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Good afternoon to all. I am Deepa Kittur, lecturer in Commerce and Business Management, Crossland College. Respected dignitaries, esteemed speaker of the day, Mr. Shashank, and dear participants, I am immensely happy to share our feeling of gratitude to everyone who helped us to make today's session a success. First of all, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Mr. Panchanatham, Vice Chancellor of the Tamil Nadu Teachers Education University, Chennai, for all his guidance and support in organizing this seminar. Thank you, sir. We are grateful to Mr. V. Balakrishnan, the Registrar of Tamil Nadu Teachers Education University, and Professor M. Govindan, Dean of Faculty, for all their support. I also place on record heartfelt thanks to Professor Samuel K. Samuel, Principal of Crossland College, for his active support throughout this webinar. Thank you, sir. Coming to today's speaker, Mr. Shashank Rao, he has taken us to a new world of teachers with his charming presentation. He is full of energy and his ideas are so inspiring that all of us have something to take home. Dear Mr. Shashank, by sharing your experience with us about the process of training future leaders, you have made a big impact on the teaching community. We are motivated by your enthusiasm and inspired by your achievements as a leader and as a social entrepreneur. Today, you made the session so lively and interactive instead of making it theoretical one. Personally, what I felt is at this young age, your efforts towards making yourself a mobile library and a great leader, you are uncomparable. Shashank, we have visualized the concepts and convinced. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time in spite of your other schedule to talk to us this morning. On behalf of Tamil Nadu Teachers Education University and Crossland College, I profuse thank you for your inspiring presentation. I feel delighted to thank the organizing secretary of this webinar and the coordinator, Dr. T. Shivashakti Rajamal, Enter for Capacity Building Programs for School Teachers, Tamil Nadu Teachers Education University, Chennai, for her untiring efforts in organizing this webinar. Dear Madam, we are all benefited by the number of webinars you have organized. Please accept our sincere gratitude and appreciation for all your hard work. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I wish to express my thanks to Dr. Robert Clive, sir, the organizing secretary, for all his efforts in making this session possible. Thank you, sir. I also thank the entire team of the organizing committee of this webinar for their selfless service. Last but not the least, my heart goes out to extend sincere thanks to all the participants for your active participation and encouragement. Thank you, friends. Thank you, one and all.
So
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much,
I just have a small announcement.
Hello?
In the series of the webinar, tomorrow's session is going to be by Dr. Batmini Pai and Miss Andrea from Australia. They'll speak on a caregiver's experience of reaching the unreached in the Australian bushfire experience. Please tune in at 11 a.m. tomorrow. We are looking forward to another wonderful session. Shashank, you have made a difference in the lives of many teachers and the future leaders. Once again, thank you so much. Dr. Shivashakti,
yes, sir.
thank you so much
sir.
for this opportunity.
Hello?
You're to unmute, Dr. Shivashakti. It's by mistake, it's muted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Once again,
Hello?
thanks, sir.
Hello?
Yes, principal, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Hello?
Yes.
Ma'am, I have already joined in yesterday in Zoom link, but network problem disconnected. YouTube channel, so I have joined the YouTube channel, but the feedback link is not submitted.
Sir, please message me, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yes.
Sir, thank you so much, Dr. Robert, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Samuel, sir, principal, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Anjani, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all the panelists. Once again, thank you, sir. Thanks, sir.
Thank
You are
you.
the gifted children of your mother. Please ask her.
I'll communicate.
You are always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
God bless you. God bless you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Robert, sir. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yes.
Hello,
Done.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Hello. Ma'am, feedback link yesterday submit link.
Sir, please, anyone message me.
Yesterday,
Please don't ask panelists. Don't ask program, please.
Sir, you can message it. Sir, you can message
me, please. You can message me, sir.
She'll respond. She'll respond. Yes.
Please message me.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you. Sir, Robert, sir, shall we wind up?
Yeah. I think it's done. It's done. I just want to thank Mrs. Deepa and Salwa. They did a good job of
I forgot.
thanking.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you, Salwa.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deepa. அவங்களுக்கு இன்னைக்கு எக்ஸாம் இல்லையா சார்?
Thank you. Yes,
Salwa.
Dr. Shashi. No, actually, they have on 9th. So in between, I disturbed them. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think you can just close.